An 18-year-old girl crosses the threshold of a hidden world. It's a private clinic and she's come for an abortion. 1 in 3 women will have one. She's 9 weeks pregnant, an accident. She's single and she's already got a 2-year-old daughter.
I wouldn't be able to cope mentally or physically because my daughter does tire me out a lot now. I don't think I could cope with 2 young children running about all day long.
There are 200,000 abortions a year in Britain, more than 500 a day. Alan Rogers will do 30 this morning. He's one of the few doctors prepared to allow us behind the closed doors of his operating theatre. He says he and his patients have nothing to hide.
I think it's wrong to try and make a woman feel guilty about something which she is going to do. I don't think that's profitable at all.
For this girl, abortion is a last resort. The decision's not been easy.
If I could, I'd go through giving the baby up for adoption, but I couldn't do that. Because if I had the baby, that's it. I wouldn't want to let it go. It is then a part of me. I've given birth to it, and I really couldn't let it go.
There's nothing wrong with any of the women on this morning's operating list, and probably nothing wrong with their babies either. They're abortions for social reasons and legal up to the 24th week of pregnancy.
I think if somebody wants to have a baby, they should have one, and I think if somebody doesn't want to have a baby, then they shouldn't have one.
The decision's my decision, no one else's, and it will be made by me and no one else. And I will not be made to feel guilty for my decision.
I think we've now decided that it's not a child, certainly not before the 24th week.
Who's decided?
The medical profession, the country, the government, us in general, society in general. We don't kill children. I don't kill children.
What do you kill?
I terminate pregnancies.
You don't see it as a child?
Absolutely not.
Do you see it as a
Absolutely
potential
not.
life?
Of course, but so are all my sperm, so are all your eggs, potential lives.
As a Christian, I believe that all life is given by God and comes from God and is sustained by God. So any tampering with life, killing of life or taking of life is a very serious step to take. However, the Church of England as such hasn't said what its position on abortion is for a long time, and there is an assumption that most Christians would say that they are against abortion. Personally, I feel that abortion in a perfect world would not exist any more than war would, but in the same way that war is sometimes the resort that you turn to, so abortion is sometimes the best way out of a bad situation. It's not a good way out of a bad situation, but it's the most practical and the best way to go forward at that point in time for that individual. So you may find a fairly young woman finding herself pregnant, and then she may think, how am I going to give this child the sort of care that I would want it to have? You may find, say, a person who's got 2 children already thinking, can I actually handle a severely disabled child, which is what I'm carrying at the moment. You may find that somebody is just at the end of their tether and cannot see how life can continue with a child as well. As a parent, I know that parenting is extremely hard and extremely wearing and very demanding, and I think sometimes it is just more than people can actually handle. I would never, if I was approached by somebody who wanted counselling through this sort of decision, tell them what to do. I would just get them to explore the different ways forward, to think about the consequences of their actions, whatever they decide to do, and then try to support them through whatever they decided to do. I have to say that as somebody who's got an adopted elder brother, I would love to see society returning to the idea of carrying a child to term, having a child, giving birth, and then taking the incredibly hard decision of to give that child to a couple who desperately want one, and you don't actually feel that you're able to give this child what you would like it to have. However, I mean, obviously I have supported women who have had abortions, and quite frequently part of that support has been some form of confession because they feel that they did something very wrong. But to take them through that confession and to begin to see that maybe the child would understand why they took that course of action, and that God would always, always say, you know, you are sorry, fine, you know, you need to live now with the rest of your life. When we look at the way that Jesus lived, he never condemned people. He always loved them and accepted them. And then they worked out for themselves whether they'd done something good or bad. And I think that's the way that the Christian church should respond. Within the Christian church, there is a huge range of opinions about abortion. At either end, you've got people who will not tolerate, will not acknowledge abortion in any way, will just say it is completely wrong. And that, I think, does not help women who eventually decide that an abortion or termination is, in fact, the best way forward at that point in time.
Father Maurice Reedy is a professor of moral theology and lectures on medical ethics. So I put to him the crux of the matter. When exactly does human life begin?
Strictly speaking, we must presume that human life is present from the beginning. There seems to be no other satisfactory point at this stage of science. There seems to be no other satisfactory point of judging it other than from the start.
So that's when the sperm meets the ova, when the two come together.
When the ovum is fertilized, yes.
That is human life.
Yes, that is what we believe. We believe, we operate on the presumption that that is human life, yes.
And does that fertilized egg have the status of a full individual?
We believe that it has the status of a human being, yes, and therefore we must respond and to that status and respect it, yes.
So an abortion is the equivalent of murder?
Yes.
From the Pope down through the hierarchy of the Church, its priesthood consistently teaches that motherhood is the supreme ideal, and thus abortion is always and utterly wrong.
The more you look into the practices, even in Catholic hospitals, where if a woman has a miscarriage, certainly in the first 12 weeks gestation, there isn't a baptism, there aren't the last rites, there isn't a burial, it isn't treated, the fetus is not treated as a person who has died. So I think there are a lot of double standards about it. I think there's, you know, that we haven't resolved it, but certainly I wouldn't see it as a killing.
If the unborn child is already a child,
Yes.
why, when a Catholic woman has a miscarriage,
Yes.
are there no baptismal rites or last rites or funeral service?
Well, usually because the child is dead. And baptism is something that's administered to a live person, to a person, not to a corpse.
But there is no religious ritual of any kind at that point?
No.
There's an incongruity there, isn't it? Because if it is a child who has died, should there not be some funeral rites?
Well, if the child is lost late in the pregnancy, there are arrangements for the burial of that child and for the burial of a stillborn child. If the child is lost very early on in the pregnancy, as you well know, at times there can be difficulties of identification and so on can arise. So there hasn't been a development of any right.
That strikes me as odd, because your argument is based on the fact that from the moment the egg is fertilized, that is a child.
Yes.
If it miscarries in the second month, that is a dead child.
Yes.
I would expect theology to take a strong view.
In practice, it's not always possible. I know it's easy to discuss it in that way, but in practice, one is talking about things which are not easy to identify and which in the human situation could possibly give rise to more difficulties than you would solve.
Sikhism is a way of life. It is a guidance for every Sikh person. Every Sikh person looks to himself or herself as to what they feel the right or the wrong thing would be. But in general, Sikhism condemns termination or abortion. However, if in certain circumstances like the female or the mother, its life is in jeopardy, or there are other circumstances where the fetus may be abnormal, then abortion would be advised. And I certainly would advise my patients to have an abortion in those circumstances. Sikhism believes that life is sacred right at the outset, at the time of conception. That is a time when the soul enters the fetus or the new human being that is going to be. I think the actual Sikh view is ambiguous, because in the Sikh writings there isn't a view on abortion. However, as Sikhism is a way of life, it gives you the right to choose, it gives you the right to decide what's the best for you and how you view the religion. I think in general abortion is not accepted unless it's special circumstances. You know, we actually believe that life is very, the sanctity of life is very important. However, if it means that it's dangerous to the mother or the baby or other children, then we would condone abortion. I think social abortion would be abortion or termination of pregnancy for social reasons or for birth control, where the woman involved hasn't taken adequate precautions and there isn't a medical reason for this abortion. It is just because it may just be financial, it may be that she doesn't want to have another child, so no real concrete medical reason or no real psychiatric reason that she should have the abortion. I think in that respect, because it is just a social termination, it's not acceptable, because it is just based on how the woman feels, and I think it doesn't. It goes against the sanctity of life. I think the Sikh belief is that life probably begins at conception. So when the sperm and the egg meet, that is when life begins, and that is when the soul is entered into the fetus or the being that's going to be. However, one of my concerns as a general practitioner working in the area that I work, in Isleworth, Hounslow, I have quite a large ethnic minority population. There is a tradition for, especially in India, of female infanticide. Female infanticide being killing young newborn female infants, or indeed having terminations of pregnancy once an ultrasound has been done and a female fetus has been identified. Luckily that does not happen in the UK, because most of the hospitals do not reveal the sex of the baby, of the fetus. Sikhism condemns that view very strongly, because Sikhism believes very strongly that males and females are very much equal, and so female life is as precious as a male life. I think in general the general Sikh view would be that we would support the female, the mother, through a circumstance where the fetus was abnormally affected. However, if the mother actually felt that she wanted to hang on to the fetus and wanted to have the baby, then again we would support that and we would give her all the support that she required. Sikhism certainly preaches equality for women and for men, so women have a choice of an abortion or not to have an abortion. However, the underlying principles of Sikhism that override that principle would be the sanctity of life. So the woman would have to make a choice, but for her being a good Sikh, the sanctity of life would be paramount.
Medical advances mean doctors can now keep alive babies born more than 4 months premature, when abortion is still legal. It's here on the edges of life that some doctors feel the abortion debate enters new territory. It's Sunday afternoon, and a woman 6 months pregnant has just checked into a private abortion clinic and handed over £645. She already has a child and wanted to keep this one. But the father's a drug dealer and addict who first encouraged her to have the baby, then changed his mind.
I was shocked when I first found out I was pregnant. I didn't want another baby. But when I told my boyfriend, he seemed pleased, and I thought it'd be nice to have a brother or sister for my daughter. But when I was 4 months pregnant, He said it wasn't the right time for a baby. I didn't know what to do. I asked the hospital for an abortion, but they said I was too late. Now it's so big I can feel it moving. It's hard, but I'm scared to go ahead with another baby on my own.
She's one of almost 650 women a year who have abortions at this very late stage in pregnancy. To prevent the possibility of the fetus being born alive, the abortion will take place in 2 stages. Under general anaesthetic, the doctor will first cut the umbilical cord, killing the fetus. Half an hour later, the first part of the abortion is over. The fetus is dead. Tomorrow, it will be surgically removed. Some doctors find it hard to justify social abortions this late, but this woman believed she had no choice. This baby is just a few weeks older than the fetus which was removed in the clinic.
The line that was doing for the feeding had to be taken out.
Dr. John Wyatt runs the special care baby unit at a large London hospital. He spends his life struggling to save premature babies and believes it's time he and his colleagues ask questions about what's going on at the edges of viability.
It's now possible with intensive care to give a very good chance of life to babies who are as small as 24 or even 23 weeks of gestation. But at the same time, because abortion is legal up to 24 weeks and in some cases beyond, you have this rather bizarre situation that you can have one group of doctors who are concentrating on trying to save the life of a very small baby, and at the same time, even in the same hospital, abortions are being performed at the same gestational age.
I really don't know when life begins, and I guess if somebody could actually give us a definitive answer, it would be really helpful. Your sperm and the sperm and the egg meet and they unite, but so often nothing ever happens and the woman never carries a baby, they just are lost. You have the fact that after 3 months, you are much less likely to miscarry than you were in the first 3 months. And as the fetus gets older and older, so for me it becomes more and more difficult to say a termination is appropriate. The classic problem must come when a woman in a ward is having a termination of a fetus at 23 weeks. And in the ward next door, the staff are saving the life of a fetus of 23 weeks. And that just seems a real problem.